Hi, my name is Juliet Selgren, and this is my podcast, The Great Antidote. This podcast has been brought to you by the Center for Growth and Opportunity at Utah State University. To learn more, visit www.thecgo.org. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Michael Strain, author of the book The American Dream is Not Dead, but Populism Could Kill It. He's the Director of Economic Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute, and he writes for Bloomberg Opinion. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Before we start talking about your book, I wanted to ask you the question that I ask all of my guests. What is the most important thing that people my age or in my generation should know, but we don't?
Well, I don't know what the most important thing is, I suppose. I think what I would encourage people your age to do is to aspire, to dream big dreams and to have big aspirations and to feel empowered and to feel like you can change the world, and to have energy and to try and apply that energy to making things better. You know that's I think, critically important for people at your stage of
Yeah,
what.
I mean, without that, what do you have?
That's right.
Like, you need that to start. So, now let's turn to your book. I want to set the stage for our conversation by asking you to define a few terms. The title of your book is The American Dream is Not Dead, but Populism Could Kill It again. So, the American dream isn't dead, and being a 17-year-old, and I have almost my entire life ahead of me, I like to hear that. But what is the American dream, and to what extent does since a lot of people have different definition, not different definitions, but slightly varying definitions, what is your specific definition, and what do you mean by populism?
Yeah, so the American dream is a complicated and somewhat amorphous concept that certainly changes over time, and that means something different for different people. I think a common element of the American dream, no matter when you're referring to, or no matter who you're talking to, is an economic component. That may even be the central component of the American dream. Simple ideas like hard work pays off, like the possibility of bettering your economic outcomes through hard work, um, the idea that your children can have a higher living standard than you, and can go on to be more successful than you were. Uh, the idea that we are not a class society, and that the rewards of the economy don't only accrue to a small number of people. These sorts of things, I think, are very central to the American dream, and those are the kinds of issues that I focus on in my book. Uh, uh, Again, I think that certainly doesn't capture the entirety of the concept, and I think the American dream means different things to different people, but I think that's a common and broadly shared element.
And populism?
So, populism is a kind of political uh, situation where, quote unquote, the people are pitted against, quote unquote, the elites. I think other important characteristics of populism are that it reflects a closeness to the rest of the world. We need to kind of pull the drawbridge up and take a adversarial posture toward immigration, take an adversarial posture toward free trade and toward globalization, um, and really kind of turn inward. I think pessimism is an important element of populism as well. Uh, the idea that things are not good, and that there needs to be kind of fundamental change. So I think those three elements, an aggressive pitting of the people against the elites, a turning inward, and a pessimistic outlook, I think can when all those things are present, I think you can argue that you're looking at populism.
So, in your book, you write, quote, "The American dream is not dead. It is surprising that such a sentence would be so controversial, but it is," end quote. I have to say that I'm not that surprised because, as you mentioned earlier, people are pessimistic. I talk to some of my friends about this sometimes, and listening to them, you would think America is horrible. It's a terrible place to live. Can you tell us a bit more about the people you are reacting to, the people you are writing to with this book?
Um, uh, so I think that what we've seen in recent years is a pretty broad consensus that uh, that the economic quote unquote game is rigged against working people and in favor of the elites. That productivity doesn't translate into higher wages. In other words, that hard work doesn't pay off for workers. That America is ossifying into a class society and is no longer characterized by upward mobility. That market forces have permanently hollowed out the middle class and things of this nature. You see that type of rhetoric, and that you see that understanding of American life present on the political left. Certainly, you see major figures on the political left, like Bernie Sanders, like Elizabeth Warren, making arguments to that effect. You see the same thing on the political right. You see conservative populists like President Trump, like Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, even Senator Marco Rubio to an extent, who are painting that same picture of American life. You see it in the business community, business leaders like Ray Dalio, the billionaire investor. You see it among public intellectuals and economists. You see that type of view reflected in commentators. It's something that Tucker Carlson has in common with Rachel Maddow. And so I think it's a widespread and pervasive view. And my basic thesis is that view is incorrect, which is why I characterize it as a controversial opinion.
So, let's turn to your case for optimism. You write, quote, "Yes, many towns left behind by automation and globalization are struggling, but most towns aren't former manufacturing towns. Yes, male workers who never finish high school have seen their wages stagnate, but it has not been the experience for typical workers. Yes, far too many Americans are suffering from opioid addiction, but most Americans aren't. Yes, the recovery from the Great Recession was long and slow, but the recession is in the rear mirror." End quote. Can you walk us through why you believe that the American dream isn't dead?
Yeah, so that section of the book that you just read makes an important point, which is that my argument is not that we don't have serious problems. Of course, we do. We have a major problem right now with the coronavirus epidemic and the terrible devastation that's wreaking on people's healths and these horrible mortality statistics, but also the economic damage that it's causing as well. Uh, if you kind of step back from this immediate pandemic crisis and think about longer term issues facing the United States, there are some major problems. We have some towns and communities that have been left behind by technological automation and by globalization. We have a labor market that doesn't work very well for a lot of middle aged men who don't have a high school degree. Um, uh, we see some pretty serious problems in terms of the rising rate of suicides and the opioid epidemic and many other things. Um, uh, so um, I don't want to deny any of those challenges or minimize their importance. My point is not that we don't have challenges. Of course we do. My point is that if you were to uh, zoom out from those pockets of problems and try and paint a picture of what the longer term trends look like for typical workers, for typical households, uh, uh, that 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 the longer term trends look better than our biggest problems. So if you look at wages for typical workers, you don't see stagnation. You see that wages have grown by about a third over the past 3 decades, which is a considerable increase in purchasing power. If you look at household income, you see that household income for typical households, for the median household, has not been stagnant. You see that also has enjoyed considerable growth, and when you factor in all the financial resources households receive, that's gone up by well over a third. If you look at the middle class, it's certainly true that technological automation has reduced employment in some kind of typical traditional middle class jobs like manufacturing jobs or clerical jobs. But but that's not um, the whole story. It's also the case that economic dynamism is creating new opportunities in the middle of the labor market as well, and that you're seeing an increase in employment in some new middle class, middle wage jobs. If you look at economic mobility, you see that three-quarters of people who are in their 40s today have a higher household income than their parents had when their parents were in their 40s. That is a uh, significant amount of upward mobility by my judgment. And if you look at where the gains from economic activity are accruing, what you see is that uh, you see um, that workers do enjoy the fruits of their that productivity growth does translate into higher wages, that hard work does pay off, not just for the top 1% or the top 1/10 of 1%, but for workers up and down the income ladder. So on the whole, over the longer term, uh, you see wages growing, you see improvements in living standards for typical households. You see economic dynamism and market forces that are creating opportunities at the same time as other opportunities are diminishing. You see significant levels of upward mobility. You see an economy that rewards workers for their contributions and for their effort. So that I think is the case that the American dream is not dead. But again, that doesn't mean that there aren't real problems. It doesn't mean that there aren't people who are left behind. it doesn't mean that there aren't places that have been left behind. Instead, it just means that when you zoom out from those serious pockets of problems, that you see a different picture. This relates to the current situation. I say the American dream is not dead, and I don't think it is. And I say that the last 3 decades have seen considerable economic success for typical workers, and I think that's true. But it's not uh, a story of uninterrupted success or a story of uninterrupted progress. Um, uh, Workers face challenges and households face challenges, and the coronavirus pandemic is a serious public health problem. It's also a serious economic problem. Um, and uh, uh, um, and that's going to cause a lot of suffering for millions and millions and millions of people. I think it's important to uh, recognize in that workers and households have shown remarkable resilience to challenges and rise to those challenges when they present themselves, most recently in the Great Recession. And I think we have every reason to believe it's going to happen again this time.
So, the challenges you mentioned earlier, how large are they compared to the overall success and the successes that our nation has seen? And what causes the problems?
Um, the causes of the problems are varied. And I think we don't know in many cases. We don't. I don't think we have a good handle on what was driving the increase in suicides, for example. I don't think we have a super good handle on why it is that male employment rates have been trending down. So the causes of a lot of these problems, I think, are hard to pin down. But we still know that they are. We still know that they are problems, and that they deserve attention, and they deserve government action. Um, how do they measure up against the successes? All the statistics that I use in the book. So when I say that wages for typical workers, for workers who are not supervisors, when I say that those wages have gone up by a third over the past 3 decades, I'm including the groups of workers who have had much less success in the labor market um, uh, in those calculations. Uh, so in terms of just kind of pure uh, statistical importance, the successes outweigh the failures.
I don't want to seem as though I'm minimizing these challenges that, I mean, as you said, but I can't help but wonder why, with some of these, such as the decline in male workers in the workforce, why the focus is not also on women coming into the workforce. They have more job opportunity than before, and it seems to make up for the fact that men drop out. I mean, not in the men's lives, but in just looking at the numbers, the amount of people in the workforce hasn't been changing that much as like it would seem. And I get that it is a new order and it may be disturbing in a way, but it's not all bad. I'm also wondering if we fail to appreciate the wealth that we have now compared to many people in other countries or Americans of the past. Like, nearly every American walks around with a phone in their pocket. Like, that's a computer. They didn't exist before 2007 and I was 4. So I don't really remember what it was like to not have them, but we have so many uses for them. We walk around with something that helps us know where we are at all times, stay in touch with people, stay in shape, bank, shop. And some people even say that cell phones are going to be essential in helping us get out of this lockdown. But it seems like, other than just phones, there's so much technology that has been helping us to face like this pandemic that we did not have before. We could not have responded to the pandemic in the same way as we are today. But also, I had Don Boudreau on this podcast a few months ago, I think. Weeks, months, time flies. But he wrote a piece where he made the case that many ordinary Americans, in many ways, are richer than even Rockefeller, the richest American, was a mere 100 years ago. In other words, aren't we underappreciating the amount of advancement we've faced and how good we have it?
Well, I think some people certainly do. I mean, when you when you get when you get the sense that some people think that life was better in the 1950s or the 1970s or whenever. Yeah, I think certainly I think certainly that that reflects a lack of appreciation for the progress that we've made as a society and for how good life is today relative to the previous eras.
In your book, you don't mention the role that government programs play in keeping people out of work or away from better paying jobs. I've interviewed Matt Mitchell like last week. He's from Mercatus and he was talking about occupational licensing, which makes it more expensive for working parents to pay for childcare and things like that. And Don Boudreau and I have talked about the minimum wage and its impact on lower income workers. And soon I'm going to be interviewing Ed Glazier on the impact of land use and zoning regulations on people's ability to move to places that offer higher wages. These government regulations hurt lower income Americans, many of whom are the same workers that you mentioned as not doing as well as we would like. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think those are excellent topics, and I think we need to look at the ways that regulatory barriers um, uh, make it difficult for people to advance and to succeed. And I certainly think that land use regulations are one of those. It would be better for workers and better for the economy uh, if we had more geographic mobility, if people moved to parts of the country that had better job opportunities for them. And one of the reasons that doesn't happen as much as it used to is that housing prices are so high, and one of the reasons housing prices are so high are land use regulations, and so that's a good example of government policy that's impeding economic mobility and economic success.
Now, I want to talk about the threat of populism. Can you tell us what you see and what you fear? And can you tell me and listeners who are my age what we can do to prevent your fears from materializing? I mean, it is our future and we should be willing to fight for it, right?
Oh, I think that's absolutely right, and I think it's great if people in your generation were to become active in understanding these issues and thinking about what you can do to help make the situation better. I have a number of worries about populism, and some of them I think are very specific to people at your stage of life. Populism. Uh, Advances a narrative of victimization where people are the victims of forces that are beyond their control and don't have agency and can't really improve their situation, and so you hear this in the political right that your economic situation uh, uh, isn't your responsibility, but you're a victim of immigrants, or you're a victim of trade with China, and the elites have done these free trade agreements, and you've paid the price of them, and you should be angry at the elites as a consequence of this. you hear similar things on the political left. You know, the game is rigged against working people in favor of the billionaires. I mean, this is a very common view that the populist left espouses. Um, and something I worry about is that people at your stage of life will hear these messages, and that it will dim your aspirations, and that it will reduce your energy, and that you will enter the workforce thinking that you can't aspire to much, thinking that hard work won't pay off, thinking that the game is rigged against you, and it's not. And so I think, a major issue with populism is the message that it sends to people, particularly to people at a younger stage of life. A second major challenge with populism is just the policy prescriptions that it advances would not accrue to the benefit of workers and in typical households. So there are a number of things to worry about, and some of the things to worry about are, I think, specific to people or not specific to, but really apply well to people who were younger.
So, finally, we're in a pandemic right now, and it's challenging to make the case that things are going well, that things are going great. And obviously it will pass, but right now it seems so huge and so overwhelming. How has the crisis affected your optimism?
Well, um, I think we are in for a very difficult period, and there's there should be no obfuscating that or denying that or sugarcoating that. I mean, I think we all need to be gearing up for some hard times, and we need to be thinking about what public policy can do to help support the economy and support workers and help advance the cause of economic recovery. And I've been spending a lot of my time on exactly those issues. Um, this could be with us for a while. We're likely to see record rates of unemployment, record declines in national income, and I expect that the recovery from this will be more rapid than what we're typically used to. But I also suspect that a year from now, we'll still be in pretty bad shape, and we'll still have millions of unemployed workers and millions of households whose income has suffered, and uh, uh, businesses trying to stay afloat or uh, get back on their feet, and it's just going to be an enormously challenging situation. Um, uh, and again, we need government to step up and do what it can to advance the cause of economic recovery here. Uh, this is a hard time and a hard moment for our country and for workers and for families. Uh, at the same time, I am still optimistic about the longer term trajectory for typical workers and for typical households. I expect that this is going to be a setback and this is going to be a challenge and an obstacle, but I also suspect that um, uh, a year or two or three from now, this will be in the rearview mirror, and that American workers and families will continue their upward march of economic progress, and that's really a testament to the resiliency of American workers and to their ability to deal with really devastating challenges like this. So my longer term optimism is certainly still intact. Uh, and I think uh, we're going to have a challenging period ahead here.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been very inspiring. I can only really speak for myself, but it seems like the next generation has a lot of work to do to preserve our economy, our lifestyles, the American dream that you have so nicely described in your book. Thank you.
Thank you very much.